The Agenda with Michael Knight on News Radio 560 KPQ and KPQ.com.
9.5 minutes past 1 o'clock. Good afternoon. The gateway to the weekend has begun. Michael Knight on The Agenda. And our very special guest is Judge Robert McSeveney. He's a candidate and the incumbent, the judge for the Chelan County Superior Court. Welcome to the program, Judge. Nice to have you in the Good morning, Your Honor, I should say.
Yes. Good to be here.
That phrase seems kind of trite, but it's a very important phrase in court, isn't it?
Yes.
They have to say it, and they better mean it.
That's correct.
Good morning, Your Honor. And in this case, good afternoon, Your Honor. Let's talk about the job that you have. You're the magistrate in the Superior Court.
Yes, I'm actually a Superior Court judge. I was appointed in January by the governor to fill a vacancy that occurred when Judge Small left, and I'm now the incumbent judge.
So this is the first time you've run for office? Or
No.
Not? No?
I ran in 2005. I was a judge in Kent. I did not have an opponent for a number of years until now.
What did the governor say when he called you for the appointment?
It was a Friday, and I was driving, and I received a phone call. He was at the airport and offered me the position of the Superior Court here in Chelan, which I accepted. He was very appreciative and grateful. He has stated, given my experience, everything from law enforcement to prosecution, U.S. immigration judge, and so forth, he felt I would be an asset to Chelan County.
In fact, I was looking at one of your printed materials for your campaign, and it said that you were Police Officer of the Year. And I said, well, that's got to be a misprint. Then I said, Bellevue Police. And I thought, wait a minute. I bet he started his career behind the badge. Is that true?
I did. When I was 19, I was hired by the Bellevue Police Department. They had a cadet program at that time. And when I turned 21, I had taken the test, and thereafter I passed it. They liked me, and they hired me. So I was there almost 10 years.
When you look back at your career as a police officer, what immediately jumps to mind?
Well, it was a time, an era that it was great to be a police officer. I enjoyed the city. We had a great chief, Don Van Blaricum, and a lot of great training. And it was a pretty progressive police department in those days.
When you made the transition from policeman to lawman, how did that happen?
Well, I had been on the department. I've been in various positions within the department. I would have gone into being a canine officer, but I had taken the law school admissions test, and I did fairly well on that, and then was admitted to, at that time, UPS Law School. I felt if I didn't go, I'd probably regret that down the road in life, and so I resigned and went to law school.
So did you find it difficult? Did you find it renewing? Did you find that you were on the right path?
Well, I found that I probably should have checked it out more before I showed up there. I had never been in a law school and never had sat in and considered what I was getting into. But I, put on the seatbelt and I went through the process, and I enjoyed it. I'm glad I did.
Now, some people might say the law, how can you enjoy that? But the process and the acquisition of the talent to practice law successfully is a great achievement.
Yes, I had excellent professors. I met many fellow students, many of which have been friends ever since.
Number one on the, by the way, my favorite Thai restaurant in town is passing out your campaign materials. That's where I received this piece of information, and it's really pretty valuable. Outstanding Judge of the Year, there's something to be proud of.
Yes.
How did that come to be?
Well, I was a municipal court judge for a little over 17 years, and during that period of time, I was pretty active in the Judges Association. I was on the State Judicial Conduct Commission. I was voted on. I was on that for several years. I co-chaired the board for judicial administration. But that award actually came, I was nominated by Superior Court Judge Culp up in Okanagan, because I was helping other judges statewide with issues. We had a listserv, and there were a lot of things that would come up. People had questions. So I kind of used that as a teaching tool and try to help others. And I was recognized for my labors in that regard.
Do the judges within the state interact with one another in organizations like that around information or changes in the law?
For the most part, they do. There's a listserv that, for example, covers all the district municipal court judges. And we also have a Superior Court listserv. Although the district and mini listserv is much more active, people have questions about things and those kinds of things, or there's training and things, it's all conveyed in the listserv.
But judges can interact with men of their own persuasion.
That's correct. I can interact with a judge anywhere in the state if I choose to do that.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Let's talk about some of the, without being specific about it, what are some of the cases that you remember that came through court that were of a memory to you that stay with you?
This court or immigration court or?
Well, you choose.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I've had a lot of interesting cases. So far this year in Superior Court here, I would have to say that there's no outstanding case. There's no, high-profile, newsworthy case that I could point to. But when I was in the U.S. immigration courts, I handle everything from asylum cases to torture cases, national security cases involving pretty significant people, MS-13 people, Al-Shabaab, many of the motorcycle gangs, some of those folks. Immigration.
So far, that's a pretty rough crowd.
It's a pretty rough crowd. I was down at the Otay Mesa Detention Facility, which is about 4 miles north of Tijuana and right next to the Donovan State Penitentiary. So I had that docket, and most of those people were all aggravated felons. And so I would hear cases where either the government is asking remove this person from the United States or don't let him in. And that's pretty much what an immigration judge does. But on the other hand, the immigration judge by law has an obligation to try to find or seek out a basis where the person could remain in the United States. So a lot of people don't understand that immigration judges actually do work for the alien in an effort to try to find a legal basis because it's extremely complicated law. And it could be easy to miss something.
And it seems to be getting more exasperating by the month, it seems that way.
Well, my experience has been the law has been on the books for a long time, but depending on the administration, there's selective enforcement.
And that's something that we read into our judging. We say, well, the judge can make up his own mind about this. He can use politics to come up with a decision. But with sentencing guidelines, that's not the case, is it?
No, it isn't. And I think it would be improper for a judge to use politics as a basis for a decision. I mean, the judge has taken an oath to uphold the law and apply it evenly and fairly. And so when I get a case, I consider the facts. I consider the applicable law. I don't make any efforts to change the law, to legislate from the bench, and try to use my best efforts to reach an informed decision and try to adjudicate the case wisely.
I've only been in one jury, but toward the end, before we retired to the jury room, the judge gave his instructions, and the whole tenor of the trial changed. It became simple in a lot of ways. Do this, ignore this, follow these rules. If you have questions, ask me. Don't make up the answer on your own. Call me, and I'll tell you what the answer is. And I thought that was not a shortcut to justice, but finally the decision of the jury became very clear, and the decision was not amorphous and impossible to get our hands around. This was simple. Suddenly, when the judge made his instructions, the case got simpler. You find that that's the case in your courtrooms, too? Yes,
I think it is very true. I think with jury selection processes and so forth, once the panel has been selected, then it's the judge's job to preserve the integrity of the jury, try to make sure that they don't talk to people about the case. Here they gather cell phones and try to emphasize that the decision has to be based on the facts of the case and the court's instructions on the law. They're preliminary instructions the jurors are given. Then the case develops and arguments. And then at the end, the judge will instruct the jury as to what the law is. Pretty much how it works.
And it's an important turning point in the trial, to my way of thinking.
That's correct.
You may not really know what the verdict is going to be in terms of the jury until they hear those instructions.
That's exactly right. And it's kind of like anything else in life, whether it's a Monopoly game or a new dishwasher, there's instructions.
And there's a learning curve.
You need to follow them. And many times they'll send out a question and they'll ask, what did this person say in the trial, or how do we do this? And most of the time my answer is, you have the court's instructions and your collective understanding of the case. And so they got to figure it out.
When you moved from being a lawyer to being a judge, were you cognizant of the fact, as you sat at the bench, of being fair, of not being a factor in the case, just to decide what was illegal?
I've always tried to do that. Each judge is different, and each judge comes to the bench with either different training or life experiences. I have and the public has the benefit of my experience, because if you went to the King County Bar Association website, there's at least 10 years of evaluations of me by the lawyers that appeared before me. And one of my high marks is fairness and knowledge of the law and administration of the courts. I'm always proud of that. I think the highest compliment a judge can get is that we're fair in resolving the case.
And that sounds like something any parent can do with their child, but it's not like that. Being fair in courtroom is not easy.
No, because you have the parameters of the facts and the law. And I think if you explain to both parties your reasoning and why you reached that decision, that's very helpful. I had an experience once as a lawyer. I was downtown. I was appealing a case, and the judge at that time considered my argument, and he said, I'm going to take a recess. So he was off the bench about 20 minutes, came back in and said, I looked at the case. I'm denying your motion. But when I left the court, I felt, you know what? He listened to me. He considered my position. He looked at it, and I felt like I was treated fair in that case.
He consulted case law to come up with his decision.
He did, yeah. It was just my view of the case, and at that time he didn't agree with me. But I felt I'd been treated fairly, I'd been heard, and I'm not mad at him.
It's hard to spin personal animus sometimes, isn't it? But that's something that's asked of lawyers and judges. That
could be, and I have to point out that the lawyers are, quote, zealously representing their clients. So they tend to be have tunnel vision.
Outspoken
and really pushing their case. But the judge is in a position to listen to both sides, look at the law, and make a decision accordingly. And that's part of the job.
One of the things that has changed for you is that now you have to run for office, which is something new for you. And it's something that would, if I had to do it, I would be out of the race right away, because I don't think I can talk about myself in that way. Are you learning to be a campaigner?
Well, I ran a race before in 2005, albeit it was down in Kent, and now I'm in Wenatchee. But I've always emphasized that Superior Court is serious court, and that's not to take away from the district courts. But I think the public's entitled to have a well-experienced, trained, knowledgeable person in court to render a decision. You don't want somebody new learning how to be a judge on the back of the litigants, or someone who you don't know what they're going to be like, what their disposition will be, how they're going to be taken by the public, and so forth. More than any other candidate, I have a track record, and a proven track record, and I think that's valuable to the community.
Do judges have any control over what cases they view or what cases that they can excuse themselves from, and do they use that very often?
Well, the parties, if one judge, let me back up, if one of the litigants feels they can't have a fair trial before a certain judge, they can file what they call an affidavit of prejudice. That can be exercised once. And the motivation is irrelevant. It can be exercised. The case law says you get one free bite at the apple, so to speak. On the other side of the bench, if I have a case where either I know one of the litigants or one of the witnesses, and I feel my ability might be to be fair and impartial might be affected, I can recuse myself from that case. So it kind of works on both sides, but I try to have nothing where somebody could point to and say, well, look, he's his barber. He talks all the time. Every time he gets a haircut. Right. I would recuse. I would announce it to the parties. I know this person, and I will probably say, if I heard the case, I believe I could be fair and impartial. That puts it on the parties. If they want me to recuse, then they can do that. But there's some cases where it's obvious. Let's just say it's my wife as a witness. I wouldn't hear the case. Right.
Is your caseload heavy for a Superior Court judge, or does it vary?
I think it varies. Every third month I have a criminal presiding calendar, so I handle all the criminal cases for the month. There's a pretty high volume that come through. In a day, there might be anywhere from 60 to 80 cases in various stages, pretrials, those kinds of things. And there's other trials that are out there, some family law trials, there's some summary judgment motions. I have found that the workload so far here is comfortable, unlike immigration court, where it's you have these overlays of complex federal law, and the stakes are fairly high, where somebody could be returned to a country where they could be persecuted again or
worse.
Or worse, yeah.
When you prepare for trial, what does that consist of? I was told by one judge that she had to read a lot. That doesn't say much about what you're reading, but I assume you're reading the case, or you're reading case law, or what?
It really depends what you make of it. Like today, I've been reviewing all my files for next week, and I've been doing some research on some of those cases. But for the most part, I look to see why the case is there. It might be a family law motion to modify a parenting plan. It could be a criminal motion about suppressing something, or you name it. And so I look at why the case is there. I look at the briefing or the affidavits of either party, try to get an idea of what they're talking about. And then I'll take a look at, is there a court rule that applies, or a case? Is there something that can provide authority? When I started as a lawyer, I worked under two excellent judges. One of the judges was very technical. If you made an argument and he asked you, well, counsel, do you have any authority for that? A rule or a case, you better have something. So I tend to operate that way.
And isn't case law the basis of decisions anyway?
If it's clear, if it's a type of thing that's been in the works for a while. For example, search and seizure law in the state of Washington has been around a long time, and case law has developed. It's very possible, though, that we could hear a case of first impression. So at that point, you can try to find law that might be related, but you might end up on your own making a decision based on what you feel the law should be or allows.
How quickly does case law get updated so you know what's going on from the other side of the country and something that might apply to your decision?
Well, our case law, our authority is beyond the court rules. We're under Division 3 of the Court of Appeals. And so I can easily go to their website or the Washington Court's website and look at recent cases.
It's all online.
That come out. It's online, and that would include all the divisions of the Court of Appeals plus the Washington Supreme Court. I try to be aware of some of the Ninth Circuit cases and the U.S. Supreme Court, but for the most part, they don't really affect us so much. We're really governed by Washington Court of Appeals or the Supreme Court, unless it becomes a constitutional issue or question, and then federal law can apply.
What do you think the people who are going to vote for you want from a judge? Can they intellectualize it? Can they say, this is what we need?
I think they can figure that out. I was talking to somebody the other day. I said, when people need a lawyer, maybe a personal injury case or somebody's injured, a wrongful death, or a criminal case, they don't ask around, hey, who do you know that just passed the bar? What they ask for is, who do you know that's a real good personal injury lawyer? Who do you know that is an expert in family law? When people need medical help, they don't limit themselves to Wenatchee. They may go to Seattle and find just the best experts. So I think what people need to know about me is I've been a judge at least 23 years at the federal, state, and local level. I've handled thousands of criminal and civil cases and probably hundreds of jury trials. I've been there, know the rules, I've made the decision. So when people get in front of me, they should have the confidence that I don't have to learn how to be a judge on the backs of the litigants. That I prepare, I try to make the decision the best I can under the applicable case law. I've been trained, I've been to the Judicial College, I've received Department of Justice judicial training, and I have taught at the college. So I feel I'm pretty well-rounded, and I think I can be an asset here in Chelan County.
You were appointed by the State Attorney General as a federal immigration judge, and you talked about that a bit. When that began, was that something you felt you were suited for, that you knew you were going to be you hit a home run in that venue?
Well, for almost 20 years, I had served as a hearing examiner, primarily in the King County area. I conducted hearings for drug seizures, money laundering, and felony forfeitures for SeaTac Airport, King County Police, Seattle Police. I did that for quite a while. And I thought, maybe I could do this at the federal level. So I went on the Justice Department website, and Most of those jobs were in Washington, D.C., where I didn't want to go back and work.
It's a little humid.
Little humid, yeah. I did notice, though, that they were looking for immigration judges. So I read I thought, well, I don't know a thing about immigration law, but I know how to be a judge. So I applied for that. And it was a long process. It took like 2 years to get hired because there's background checks by the FBI, there's top secret clearance and those things. But I was one of like almost 2,000 people for one position, but I was appointed by the U.S. Attorney General. And I'm thankful for that. But you know something? In the interviews, was never asked anything about immigration law because they had problems, like many states and courts do, with demeanor and those kinds of...
With demeanor?
That's right, because...
Guys are losing their way on the bench?
There were some appointments at that federal level that were more political appointments, and they found that... in dealing with unrepresented people or even some lawyers that they had demeanor problems, complaints about the judges. So DOJ changed their hiring process. And so many of the questions I was asked is, how do you deal with unruly lawyers? How do you prepare the case? How do you deal with unrepresented people? Because they want people that are not going to go off the rails. It's not that you can't do that. I would never try to do that or manifest that type of thing. In fact, one of the judges has a little sticker on his bench, not here, elsewhere. It says, "Don't say it." And just a gentle reminder that, everything, for the most part, is recorded. And having been on the Conduct Commission, if there's an issue or a complaint, they're going to want to see that, listen to that recording. And they don't really care what's before or after if you had 80 cases or 20 cases. They want to know, how did you handle yourself before this particular person?
I know that being a judge must have pressures that we can't appreciate, and as those build, I can see someone's demeanor cracking under the influence. But one of the aspects of being a judge that's come up over and over again these past couple of weeks, where I'm talking to everybody running for the office, is this concept that I really enjoy called serving justice, not serving the court, not serving your career, not serving the needs of the lawyers for that matter, but serving something grander than that. What do you think about that idea?
I think that's an excellent idea. When I was interviewed by the governor's lawyers, I told them, I said, I don't have any conflicts in this community. I didn't grow up here, although we've moved here almost 3 years ago, and we love it. But I didn't have any allegiances to anybody. I could go into court Monday morning and start a jury or a civil trial and not necessarily be swayed by any relationships and that type of thing. So I had no conflicts, and I don't seek lawyer endorsements. I think that trying to get endorsements from the lawyers that appear in front of me gives the appearance of impropriety, and I don't want to be in that situation. And I try to treat everybody fairly. I try to compliment the lawyers when they've done a good job, and I think a judge needs to always be cognizant of their demeanor, that their the appearances that they give, whether it's in the courtroom, any friendships and that type of thing need to always be kind of scrutinized a bit.
Our special guest is Robert McSeveney. He's the candidate and the incumbent for the judge of Chelan County Superior Court. Your Honor, would you please ask the people of Chelan County for their vote?
Yes, I'd like to do that. I have a website. It's called judgemcseveny.com, and I've tried to list as many things on there as I think a voter would appreciate. I have well over 120 endorsements from judges throughout the state that either I've mentored or taught at the college. I've got background information on me. I've cited cases where I've made rulings on that have been appealed to the State Court of Appeals or in the federal court, so you have an idea of what kind of rulings that I've issued. And I've also listed just as much information. I will continue to list as much information so the voter can be fully informed.
His name